What if I told you that one of the most strangely interesting driving games of 2026 isn't about racing? Instead, your greatest enemy is apparently a concrete wall. This is Parking in Tight Spaces, an upcoming PC game from hungry devs and published by PlayWay. And honestly, the concept sounds ridiculous until you actually start playing it. Forget everything you know about standard driving games. This isn't about speed or drifting or doing laps. It's a puzzle game with a steering wheel. And yes, that means your mission is basically to take a vehicle, squeeze it through an unnecessarily tiny space, and somehow park it without turning the entire place into an insurance claim. The game's officially hitting Steam on August 14th, 2026, and in this movie we have a pre-release version which shows us pretty much the full game. And the idea is surprisingly simple. You drive it to a level, find the parking spot, and figure out how you're gonna get there. That's it. The levels are designed as small, handcrafted driving puzzles. You're dealing with narrow alleys, awkward angles, tight yards, obstacles, and spaces where one bad turn can completely ruin your plan. So the whole thing isn't really about driving anymore. It's about looking at the world differently. Where's the front of the car headed? How much can you turn before you clip something? Will your back end swing wide and knock over another trash can? It's all about thinking a few steps ahead, which honestly is not always my strong suit. The moment you move from something tiny to a massive bus, or God help you, a trailer, things really get interesting. Now it's not just you versus the wall, it's you versus everything physics can throw at you. According to the developers, the full game is planned to feature more than 70 different vehicles, including cars, buses, trucks with trailers, tractors, heavy machinery, and even military vehicles like tanks. And that variety is probably one of the game's biggest strengths. Parking a small car is one thing. Trying to maneuver something with a trailer is a completely different conversation. Suddenly, you're not just controlling a vehicle, you're controlling a vehicle attached to another vehicle that apparently has its own opinions about where it wants to go. And that's where the physics and positioning become important. Levels gradually become more complicated, and successful runs can be rewarded for avoiding collisions and completing the challenge efficiently. There's also a leaderboard system, which is an interesting addition because it completely changes the tone of the game. The developers describe this as a relaxing experience, and it absolutely can be. But give players a leaderboard and suddenly the relaxing parking simulator becomes the Olympic Games of reversing. Because now it's not enough to park, you have to park faster than everyone else. And I already know there's going to be somebody who spends 3 hours trying to save 0.7 seconds on a parking maneuver. The funny thing is though, I can actually see the appeal. There's something satisfying about solving a difficult parking situation. You make a mistake, reverse, adjust your angle, try again, and eventually the vehicle slides perfectly into position. It's almost like solving a physical puzzle. And unlike a traditional racing game, you're not constantly being asked to go faster. You're being asked to be more precise. Visually, Parking in Tight Spaces isn't trying to compete with something like Forza or Gran Turismo. The game uses a clean, low-poly visual style. And honestly, that makes sense. The focus is on readability. You need to understand the space around your vehicle, you need to see the obstacles, and you need to judge distances, and you need to try to be the fastest on the high score list. So having a relatively simple visual presentation actually works in the game's favor. And there's another feature that I think could make this game particularly entertaining: destruction. Yes, if a wall is in your way, apparently you can just break it. The developers specifically advertised destructible environments, meaning the game doesn't always demand a perfectly clean solution to have the fastest time. You can park properly, or you can apparently arrive at your destination after committing several acts of municipal vandalism, and I respect that. Of course, there are still some questions that the full release needs to answer. The biggest one is variety. The basic parking concept is fun, but how long can it stay interesting? The developers are promising more than 60 handcrafted levels and more than 70 vehicles, which sounds substantial on paper. But the important thing will be how much those vehicles and levels actually change the gameplay. Because if every level eventually becomes turn left, reverse, turn right, try not to hit the wall, then the novelty could wear off pretty quickly. But if the later challenges genuinely force you to approach vehicles differently, especially with trailers, buses, and heavy machinery, then there could be a surprisingly addictive little puzzle game hiding underneath this simple idea. And that's really where I stand with Parking in Tight Spaces right now. I don't think this is trying to be the next big driving simulator. It's not. This is a very focused game built around one very specific idea. Can you put this ridiculous vehicle into that ridiculous space? And sometimes that's all you need. As a 2026 PC game, I actually like that it's not trying to throw 100 mechanics at the player. No massive open world, no skill tree, no crafting system, and no character who's going to explain the parking lore for 40 minutes. Just you, a vehicle, a parking space, and an increasingly questionable decision to attempt another turn. The preview shows that the concept works, and the upcoming full release will ultimately determine whether there's enough content and variety to make the experience worthwhile beyond the initial novelty. But if you've ever enjoyed driving games, puzzle games, physics games, or simply watching a vehicle somehow squeeze into a space that looks physically impossible, parking in tight spaces might be worth keeping an eye on. Because sometimes gaming doesn't need to be complicated. Sometimes you just need a bus, a tiny parking space, and absolutely no idea what you're doing. Parking in Tight Spaces releases on Steam on August 14th, 2026, and judging by the title, I have a feeling we're all about to get very familiar with one phrase: just one more attempt. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, guys.